The goal of my sermon today is to make you give as much money as possible. And the topic of my sermon is, it's not the amount, it's the percentage. Can you say it with me? It's not the amount, it's the percentage. No power. Ooh, ooh. That's 1, 2. By the end of that sermon, you're going to hear me say this so many times, it's going to stuck in your head for the rest of your day. So say it again with me. It's not the amount, it's the percentage. Taking tithe and offerings is part of the church, and it's an important part of the church. Because church, as an organization, it's like a business. And like any other organization, it runs on money. If there's no money, it cannot run. And the more money it has, the better it runs. And the pastor will often remind the congregation about the importance of giving money. But the job of speaking explicitly about giving money is often given to guest speaker like me. Why? Because it's harder for the pastor to speak about this topic, because they are the receiver of the money. Now, speaking about giving money is going to make me sound like an imposter. But I thought, if I'm going to sound like an imposter, I might as well make it loud and clear. And I believe what I'm about to say is biblical, because in 1 Timothy chapter 6:18 it says, "Tell them to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works and generous to those in need, always being ready to share with others. By doing this, they will be storing up their treasure as a good foundation for the future, so that they may experience true life." So I will try my best to do a good job, and hopefully you'll be inspired to give a lot more money than you are giving now. So let's start by reading today's verse. Mark chapter 12, verse 41 to 44. Jesus sat down opposite the treasury and began watching how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large amounts. And the poor widow came and put in 2 lepta coins, which amount to a quadrant. Calling his disciples to him, he said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury. For they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on." In 1997, Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It was a book about teaching people how to achieve financial freedom by changing your mindset about the money, how you use and how you invest your money. And he said that to be financially free, it's not about how much you earn or how much money you have. It's about how much passive income relative to your living expenses. If you earn $100,000 a year, but if you spend $100,000 a year, then you won't last 2 months if you lose your job and you are not financially free. On the other hand, if you own a rental property that gives you $1,000 a month, and you only need $1,000 a month to live, then you are financially free. You don't need to worry about money if you lose your job, and you don't need to work for money because you are financially free. In other words, he was saying, it's not the amount, it's the percentage. And to illustrate his point, he created a game called Cash Flow 101. It's a bit like Monopoly, but the difference is that in Monopoly, you win the game by making the other players bankrupt. In Cash Flow 101, you win the first stage of the game when your total passive income is greater than your living expenses. And to start the game, you'll be given an occupation. You could be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, janitor, and truck driver, and many other occupations. And you need to fill out an income statement, and you put in the numbers that is on your card. And like real life, there are things that could happen to you that could set you back. For example, you just buy a new boat, and you need to pay $18,000. Or you just buy a big screen TV, you need to pay $4,000. And if you use a credit card, add $4,000 credit liability and add a payment of $120 to your monthly expenses. And you could go bankrupt, you could lose your job. And one of the worst things that could happen to you in terms of winning this game is having a baby. Yeah. If you have a baby, it's going to cost you $640 a month in your monthly expenses. And if you're a janitor, which is a toilet cleaner, it's going to add $70 a month to your monthly expenses. But fortunately, you're only allowed to have 3 babies in this game. And in this game, you could make money by trading stocks or buying and selling houses or businesses. And you could make a lot of money if you're lucky. But to win the game, to get out of the rat race before other players, you need to be able to devote all your money into investing things that will give you good passive income. And it's not the amount that you have. You could be stuck with $1 million and still couldn't get out the rat race. It's the percentage of your passive income in relation to your living expenses. And it depends on how much asset you have that will generate passive income. It's not the amount, it's the percentage. In verse 41, Jesus sat down opposite to the treasury and began watching how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large amounts. And the poor widow came and put in 2 lepta coins, which amount to a quadrille. Giving to the temple is a daily part of a believer's life. But on this day, Jesus did something quite strange. He was sitting there watching people give. It's not that he happens to be sitting there eating his burger for lunch. I think he already knew what he was going to say, and he was only looking for a real-life example. On that day, many rich people gave a lot of money. In fact, they gave $100,000 or more each. Then there was a poor widow who gave a small amount. When Jesus found his example, he called his disciples to come and said, "Look at this poor widow. She gave more than everyone." And it came as a surprise. In terms of the amount, who was the top giver of the day? The rich people. And the poor widow was the bottom giver. But Jesus said, no, it's the other way around. The poor widow was the top giver of the day. In fact, she gave more than everyone else. Why? Because it's not the amount, it's the percentage. She gave 100%. Why did Jesus care about percentage rather than the amount? If it is the amount, the poor can never match what the rich people gave. The amount is relative. $100 means differently to different people. $1,000 means differently to different people. $100,000 means differently to different people. $1 million means differently to different people. If it is the amount, Jesus would say, look at how much that guy gave. I want you to sell everything, borrow money, so you could give as much as that rich man. If it is the amount, Jesus would say to the rich, look at how much that widow gave. Don't give too much. You're making everyone give everyone too much pressure. Just give a little bit, like the widow. Jesus didn't care about the amount because amount is relative. It's not a good indicator of the heart, but the percentage is a better reflection of the devotion. What did Jesus want to learn from the widow? Did Jesus say this to the disciples so that they will give more money, so that the temple will have more money for renovation? No. Because in the very next verse, it says, as Jesus was leaving the temple, one of the disciples said to him, look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent buildings. Do you see all these great buildings? Replied Jesus. Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Did Jesus care about the temple? He doesn't care about the temple or about the church building. What he cares is about the devotion of the people in the building. And when he saw the poor widow, he pointed her as an example because you want them to devote their 100% like her. Brothers and sisters, the church is not judged by the appearance, but it's by the devotion of the believers in the church. I've been to several churches where they have a big church building, but there's not many people, and it feels cold, and the believers don't feel like they are very devoted. But I've also been to a few churches that is filled with people who are devoted, especially those in China. Although they are poor, you can feel like they are on fire for the Lord. I think Jesus is saying this. Look at the poor widow. Look at those poor Christians in China. Look at some of the brothers and sisters in the church who are so devoted, who give it all. Look at how devoted they are and be inspired by them. How much does God want from us? 100%. We can't all give $100,000, but we can all give 100%. So before you give God your money, give God your heart. So I want you to say to your neighbor, it's not the amount, it's the percentage. And say it again, it's not your money, it's your devotion. My second point is, it's not just the percentage, it's the living expenses. In verse 43 it says, calling his disciples to him, he said to them, truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury, for they all put in out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she owned, all she had to live on. One of the rich men was a property developer. He bought a piece of land in the terrace house zone in Jerusalem for $1.5 million. He subdivided the land to 7 units, and each of them cost $100,000 to develop. So the total development cost is $700,000. The building cost is about $3,000 per square meter, and each unit is 90 square meters. So the total building cost is $1,890,000. So the total investment is $4,090,000. Now the selling price for each unit is about $800,000. So that's the total sales of $5.6 million. So he made a profit before tax of $1.5 million. After paying a nominal tax of 33%, he earned a profit after tax of about $1 million. So his return on investment was about 25%. Now, being a good Christian, he gave 10% of his profit. So he gave a total of about $100,000. The poor widow, on the other hand, her husband died a few years ago. She has no husband or son to provide for her. And the Roman Empire didn't have a welfare benefit system. And there's no law on minimum wages. So to make a living, the poor widow was washing dishes at the local Chinese restaurant. And it's normally enough to pay for the minimum living. When she needs to go to the doctor, she will need to borrow money from her relatives or friends. When she heard that the temple is doing a fundraising for the renovation, she also wanted to give. She set up her mind to give $100. But how? She already saved about $50. She thought she could save money by working extra hours, not turning on the heater in the evening, eating very cheaply for many meals. And after doing that for a few weeks, she managed to save $95. But it's still $5 short. she has $5 in her pocket that she was ready to buy grocery for tonight. She had an idea. I could go hungry for tonight. Not eating one meal is not going to kill me. Plus, it's not my first time anyway. With that thought in mind, she put it in her last $5. As she putting the $100 into the temple treasury, she said a simple prayer. God, please remember me. What is the difference between the giving of rich man and the poor widow? In verse 44, it says that they all put out of their surplus, but she, out of her poverty, putting all she owned, all she had to live on. When comparing the giving of the rich man and the poor widow, Jesus used two words, surplus and poverty. And the word poverty was used to mean not enough in other places in the Bible. So the difference between giving from surplus and giving from scarcity is whether or not you affect your standard of living. When you're giving from a surplus, it doesn't affect your standard of living. The rich man could give $200,000 or even $300,000 instead of $100,000 and not affect his standard of living. However, if you're giving from scarcity, it will involve lowering your standard of living. You'll need to make some kind of personal sacrifice. For the poor widow to give, she needs to lower her living expenses somewhere. And whether she decides to give $100 or $200 will have a big effect on her standard of living. When you are giving from scarcity, you're not only giving an offering, you are giving a sacrifice because you're giving from your personal sacrifice. It's not the amount, it's the percentage. And it's not just the percentage, it's also the living expenses. You could be giving the same percentage, but because your living expenses changed, it changed the nature of your giving. There was a period of time in my life when I gave 20% of my income before tax. I read Malachi chapter 3 verse 10. It says, "Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it." I said to God, "God, whatever that blessing is, I want double the blessing." Now, giving tithe is giving 10% of your income. So get double the blessing, I gave 20%. And in the beginning, it was easy. I was single, I was brought up from a very frugal family, so I'm a very frugal person. Plus, I'm a boring person. I don't have costly hobbies. So although I wasn't earning much, after paying tax and giving 20% before tax, I still managed to buy a used car and save some money. Then I got married. Then I had a baby. Then I had another baby. My living expenses skyrocketed, but my income did not. And I was still giving 20%. But how? I told you that I'm the greatest sinner, and you're about to know why. Because we were spending my parents-in-law's money. I was in despair. Even if I don't tithe at all, my income was not enough to cover all the living expenses. I was too afraid to count how much I earn, how much our living expenses really are, and how much I can actually afford to give. I know I've cheated my parents-in-law to give the 20%. I was being irresponsible to my family. It felt like I wasn't giving my money, but my parents-in-law's money. And although my parents-in-laws were kind enough and never said anything, my heart was crying. When I prepared to give, when I was about to press that button to give online through bank transfer, My hands were shaking. My eyes were tears. I said to God, God, please bless me. Please remember me. It's not the amount, it's the percentage. And it's not just the percentage, it's also the living expenses. Although my percentage of giving did not change, but my living expenses increased, and it changed the nature of my giving. In the beginning, I was giving offering. Afterwards, I was giving sacrifices. I'm not saying that my experience is a role model or can be copied. All I'm saying is that when you are giving from scarcity, when you are giving by making a sacrifice, it can be very painful. Some people ask, how much should I give? Or what percentage of my income should I give? The Bible said to give tithe. Do I give 10% before tax or after tax? Well, I can't tell you exactly how much you should give. I can't say that if you're giving 10%, you're giving an offering. And if you're giving 20%, you're giving a sacrifice. Because everyone's living expenses is different. But in my personal opinion, if you're married with kids, I would say, do your best to give 10% before or after tax. But if you're single, 10% should be your minimum. Try to give 20% or even more for a period of time. Give a high percentage while you still can do it comfortably. And ask God to greatly bless you and to provide for you. So I want you to turn around and say to your neighbor, it's not just the percentage, it's also the living expenses. My last point is, lastly, I want to give you practical ways to match the giving of the poor widow. Whenever I read verse, the question that I struggle with is, how much does the rich man has to give to match what the poor widow gave? I don't want to leave the rich feeling sad like the young rich man who was faced with a challenge that is impossible to overcome. I don't want to leave you feeling guilty or without a clear instruction of what you can do. Although the poor widow gave 100%, I'm not sure if it is something that is sustainable. She could go hungry for one meal, but she can't keep on doing that for a week. I think her giving was a one-time event, and it was highlighted to emphasize her devotion. If you just give everything all the time and leave it to God to provide for you, I'm not sure if you're being a good manager of your money. And the rich people I know are mostly hardworking, frugal, and are very careful about where and how they invest and spend their money. They take risks and carry responsibilities. And simply giving everything away seems like a very careless way of managing money. You need to keep a portion of your profit to grow your investment. And I also want to recognize that the money the rich people gave does make a big difference. The $100,000 that the rich man gave can make a much bigger difference than $100. The rich people can be a great blessing to the church by giving a large percentage of their surpluses. So how can we give it in such a way that shows our total devotion to God, yet do so sustainably? And I want to offer you a few suggestions. The first one is the first fruit method. In Exodus chapter 23 verse 19 says, bring the best of the first fruit of your soil to the house of the Lord your God. The first fruit is the first harvest of any crop from the farm. And in modern days, it could be the profit from your first investment or the first income payment from your new job. And the best can be translated to mean a large percentage. So the best of the first fruit could be a large percentage of profit from your investment or a large percentage of income from your new job. When I finished uni and got a job, I gave all the income from the first payment of my first job to God. Secondly, is the give up method. when you are finished with your study and you start to work full time, you start to make money. And the things you start to think about is, how am I going to spend that money? Same to the rich guy who made $1 million from the investment. How am I going to spend that money? People start to buy things they couldn't buy when they were students, or start saving money, or buy a car or house, or buying that boat that they couldn't afford before. Can I suggest that you could give it to God instead of spending it? Let's say you save a few $100 for a new device you have been waiting for. Or if you are an investor, you made some money from investment, and you're about to buy a Tesla. And you feel that God is calling you to give. Why not give a large portion, or even all of that money that you are about to spend, and give it to God? Thirdly, is the fueling method. How much of that $1 million profit would the rich man have to give to match the poor widow's $100? Is it $200,000? Is it $300,000? Is it $500,000? In the fueling method, it's the amount that you feel hard. It's when the rich man said, I would rather go hungry than give me that amount. You see, the widow may have spent weeks to save up that $100. It takes years for the rich to accumulate that capital to invest. It can take months to find a good land, and months to design, plan, dealing with city council to get a building consent, dealing with different kinds of subcontractors, monitoring the progress of the construction, solving problems that happen on site, and work for 1 to 2 years on the project before the profit comes. And it's not fair to ask the rich to simply give everything away. I think the rich people match the poor widow's giving when he feels that the giving was hard. When he feels like he has sacrificed a large portion of his time and effort in order to give. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 7 says, each of you should give what you have decided in your heart to give. Not reluctantly, nor under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. None of what I said is meant to be compulsive. All I want to do is to lift the bar when you think about giving. What is possible? What it can feel like when you're giving a high percentage. Then it's up to you to decide what percentage you want to give to show your devotion. It's not the amount, it's the percentage, because the percentage is a better indicator of our devotion. The poor widow outgave everyone else because she gave her 100%, and she was highlighted for her devotion. And it's not just the percentage, it's also the living expenses. Your circumstances will influence how much you could give and the nature of your giving, whether you're giving an offering or a sacrifice. Giving a sacrifice can feel really painful. Whatever percentage you decide to give, I want to say, I'm so proud of you. You are giving because you love God and you are devoted to the Lord. I wish that God will bless you greatly so you have more surpluses than you could give. Thank you.